Hey everybody, my name's Matthew and I'm the developer for AfterTheCloud, a upcoming post-apocalyptic RPG that I'm building in Unity. Some of the inspiration for this game and why I'm building it. So years ago when I was in high school, I played a little known game back then in 1988 called Wasteland by Brian Fargo. It really changed the way I looked at games, particularly storytelling and narrative. I always wanted to build a game with a similar level of detail, similar level of storytelling, and a persistent world, but in a different place and time. AfterTheCloud is set in around 2050, after a devastating war that encompassed most of our planet, a war that was stopped by the invasion of aliens inspired by War of the Worlds. Other more modern inspiration for this game are games such as Wasteland 2 and 3, the modern remake of the original game that I love so much, and things like State of Decay, and even the Fallout series. So today I'm going to show you some of the gameplay, some of the components that I've built, and some of the tools that I'm using. I'm not a graphic designer or artist by any means, and trust me, you don't want to see some of the models that I've created. I'm using some paid Unity assets, I'm using some commissioned assets, and my plan is down the track to move to more commissioned assets as we go along and as the game progresses. So let's jump in and have a look. So, AfterTheCloud is a third-person RPG. I do need to throw in a disclaimer that I'm using OBS to record this and it's completely tanking my FPS, which is a bit disappointing. Normally I'm getting about 50 or 60 FPS without optimization. I'm leaving that a little bit later in the development cycle, but this is getting nailed down to about 30 at the moment, but it is what it is. The gameplay is very much about item interaction. I built an interaction system that's very flexible. It lets me integrate into some of Unity's built-in systems and also third-party controls. I've also built a custom lighting system, which I can change at any time, and it works very much like a time of day system, or I can jump straight into different times or lighting scenarios. So I can change to a nighttime setting, which changes all the reflection probes, all the lighting maps, and shadow maps as well, so that I have as ideal performance as possible, irrespective of the time of day or the lighting that I've set up. Depending on the scenarios and some of the parts of the story, there's also different lighting scenarios. We have a fog scenario, and my favourite, which is Fire Sky. This is a lighting scenario. This is a lighting profile that's active later on in the game once you're actually meeting the aliens that have arrived and potentially fighting them or negotiating with them and understanding why they've actually come to Earth. We also have different sound profiles that change the way audio works within a particular scene or an area of a scene. So I'm in an outdoor part of the scene at the moment. Once I go inside we start getting a bit of an echo effect, which you can hear as I'm walking around. What I'm going to do is collect a couple of items. I'm going to get my backpack, pick up a little drone. We have a jetpack over here, but I'm going to leave that for now. Remember, it is 2050, so Elon Musk has invented jetpacks and everyone has them. Turn on my drone. So my drone effectively is a modern equivalent of an RPG torch. Lets me illuminate where I'm going. And we have a vehicle that we can start up if it works. But it's not working at the moment. I will need to go and get some fuel for that. The drone is particularly useful in outdoor scenes where we have very minimal lighting, only from the building, and ambient lighting from things like the moon. Turn it off, it's very obvious. So let's take a look at some of the abilities the character controller has. Okay, let's look at some of the abilities that the character has. So we have some basic wall climbing. Whoop. Can't climb up over that part of the wall. Let's try here. So we can potentially climb up We can climb across walls, jump onto ledges, or I can fall down. Falling down's not that exciting. We have some basic ladder climbing, which when I was talking to my friend Mike before, I realised the ladder's completely out of scale in terms of the character, and as you can see it doesn't line up too well. So that's something that I'll fix later on. Also build a number of custom tools that are making development a lot easier, one of which is a mesh to box collider converter. If you're developing in Unity or any other game engine, you'll know that a mesh collider is actually quite intensive, performance intensive. The number of vertices it has on larger objects such as this car is actually quite significant, and that will have a very significant impact on the game's performance. So I've built a little script that quite literally works out the outer bounds of the object and builds a box collider around it. You can then remove the mesh collider, or at least disable it, and you get a major performance improvement on this particular object. The most useful tool that I've built actually replaces lots of third-party tools that I've tried over time, and I call it the Interacterer. And what it does is it lets the player interact with an object and perform one of many different features. I'm using a number of third-party frameworks such as a character controller, audio controllers, even an inventory system, and being able to wire them up from a single point is actually really, really useful. Typically you'd have to control them from within the third-party frameworks, which isn't overly efficient, as they have different APIs and different data structures. So what I've done is created a generic, I call it an Interacterer. It's a bit of a silly name, but it lets me control how you interact with an object and what it does. Some of the things it does is you can build a timer, so how long you actually hold down the interact key to trigger the interaction, whether it's automatically interacted, whether the object is locked, and that could be a door, it could be a loot chest, for example, like the ones we see here. Messages that appear when you get close to the object, when you're actually interacting with the object. Messages that appear once you've finished interacting with the object, whether it is automatically disabled or whether you can continue to interact with this object. And things like whether to show additional game objects, whether to hide game objects that you can toggle, the ability to play audio, enable the shop and crafting system that I'm using, and I'm using a third-party crafting system, whether to disable AI NPCs and enemies, whether to start a conversation using dialogue system by pixel crushers, and whether to start some text playing on a iPad. And the iPad is an in-game communication tool similar to Pip-Boy out of Fallout. Probably change this to a more generic tool down the track, but for now it'll stay as it is. AfterTheCloud also has combat, whether it be melee attacks or also weapon attacks. So we have some basic, I have a basic modern pistol here, we have sight rifles, we have rocket launchers, even have a bow and arrow in one of the scenarios, which you'll see in a future devlog. We also have a built-in driving system with a couple of different vehicles, including this buggy. This is our test scene, so there's obviously not very far we can drive around, but you get the idea. From the Interacterer System we saw earlier, we can actually use that to turn off AIs. So the AIs that are present within the scene, as you can see on the top of the roof, and also here, will no longer attack us. The key part of the story is also searching for and understanding the importance of the aliens that landed. Why are they here? What are they doing? Can we actually interact with them? Let me turn the torch on so I can see what I'm doing. And potentially meeting other NPCs to learn more about the story. So up until now what you've seen is pretty stock standard third-person RPG functionality. The real secret sauce of AfterTheCloud is actually the tripods. These are modelled after the tripods from Jeff Wayne's musical, War of the Worlds. And these are effectively placeholder assets for now. I've had these custom designed, and I'm using inverse kinematics to make them walk and function as one would expect of an alien invader. So let's check out what they look like. Remember, this is a test scene. There's a number of objects in here to test out destructibility. I also have a little walker over here which I'm using to control the launching of projectiles towards both the objects and the tripods themselves. Let's give it a whirl. So I'm using 3 different mathematical approaches to IK, or inverse kinematics. The red tripod, as you can see, is wobbling around a bit. It will stabilize once it's figured out the best arcs for each of its 3 feet. The white tripod is much more stable but a wider stance, and the green one in the front is roughly in the middle. Also testing out some destructibility, which looks pretty cool. Oh, that projectile is going a little bit too far. As you can see, the tripods also have a energy beam, or a beam weapon. As you can see, the white tripod is successfully navigating itself over a small obstacle. Once they turn around, the tripods will start firing on what's left of the ruins over there, but it will take some time. So thank you for watching through to the end of this presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Follow me on Twitter at AfterTheCloud. And please like and subscribe this video so you can be notified when I do the next devlog.